Hello and welcome to How to Study Your Bible. This is week 2, using dictionaries and concordances. I'm Travis Henderson and I'm going to take you through a brief summary of this week's content. So last week, just for the sake of context, when we last left our hero, we learned about Bible study as a whole, how it is motivated by a desire to know God and to mature in our ability to disciple others. A Bible study, because it's motivated this way, it can be fun. Yes, it does involve putting our thinking caps on, but it is fundamentally a relationally motivated exercise. Language, actually, is complex. We looked at that quite extensively last time, and it's motivated by context. This is our word we recall. Our discussion of the word world helped inform how we use context in order to determine word meaning. We had 3 basic motivations for word studies that we covered. Number 1, the Bible is written in other languages prior to English. Number 2, a word can have many uses and meanings at one time. And number 3, a word can change in meaning over time. If you have more questions about that, please see our week 1 video. Now, let's just start and review. In step 1 of a word study, remember this is a 5-step process, we start by picking a word. Well, how do we pick a word? We can ask ourselves the question, what words or ideas interest or excite us? What words or ideas confuse or mystify or even offend us? For future sessions, you can think about what words you would like to study, but for now, we'll focus just on this English word, worship, and see where that takes us. In step 2 of our 5-step word study process, we gain a modern baseline for how we might use an English word like worship. So to do that, let's open a modern dictionary. We'll pay attention to what we do and do not find in an English dictionary. And in particular, just for today, you can look at the Merriam-Webster's entry on the word worship. We have that particular entry linked here in this slide deck. If we look through that entry, we'll find certain features that the Merriam-Webster dictionary and other dictionaries by extension would contain. We find a part of speech, whether this word is a verb or a noun. In the case of worship, it can be either. We'll find a pronunciation often. We can find, of course, definitions. Those are very standard. We can find example sentences of the word used in context. We can find synonyms or other words listed that have a shared meaning with our word. We can find the etymology, which is not the study of bugs, entomology, but etymology just means word history. And even in some cases, in the case of Merriam-Webster, you can find kids' definitions. Now, a dictionary is not unchangeable. That's the first thing to remember. Words do change over time, and a dictionary's context changes over time. This is also because, fundamentally, a dictionary is prescriptive. It's not prescriptive, excuse me. It is not meant to prescribe or define, even though that's a poor use of that word there in my case. It is not meant to enforce how a word is or ought to be used. A dictionary fundamentally is meant to describe how people tend to use words. I know oftentimes dictionaries are often used in a prescriptive manner by folks who feel vindictive that a certain word is not used correctly, but fundamentally this is a misuse of a dictionary. Finally, a dictionary is not magical. These word meanings are not magically stored in some vault in Timbuktu and brought out when the new edition of a dictionary needs to be made to remind people of how words are supposed to be used. Lexicographers, people who study how words are used, they put in a lot of time and effort and research to study how words are used and then to condense and compile that information into a book or a volume we call a dictionary. So now that we've got this English baseline, this modern English baseline out of the way, let's start and take a step into our Bible. In step 3, which is what we do now, we consult a Hebrew or Greek dictionary, which helps us understand how the word was used in the biblical context. Let's look at the dictionary entries for the biblical context. And we need to understand where we find such a thing. We have 2 options, actually, for how we can look up words in a Bible dictionary, if you want to call it that. We have a resource that is free and available to us online called Blue Letter Bible. You can get to it, actually, through this URL that's linked in green here, or just by typing that into a browser or clicking on this slide deck. We'll abbreviate it BLB throughout this class. Secondly, there's another online resource called Logos Bible Software. We'll abbreviate it called Logos, and you can get to it at logos.com. We'll start with the Blue Letter Bible. Now, if you go to blueletterbible.org in a browser, you will see a banner that looks like the picture here on the screen. And you can choose your English translation by going to the little drop-down menu that is highlighted in yellow just below where you might search for a word or verse. If you click on that drop-down menu, you'll see a bunch of abbreviations for different Bible English translations. You may be familiar with one such as the ESV, or the English Standard Version, or maybe the New Living Translation, or NLT, or the New International Version, or the NIV. Just to provide some consistency, we'll be using the ESV fairly commonly throughout this slide deck and throughout the remainder of the course. So you can choose your English version, and then after that you can put a word into the search bar. We'll type in our English word worship, since that's what we'll be looking at in the following exercise. Once we click on that green magnifying glass, that search button, that's just to the bottom and the right of the search bar, we will get some results, and we'll get a bunch of colored tabs. The green tab that is labeled Lexicon is the tab that contains the information we are interested in here. Lexicon just stands for lexicon and concordance. So this tab contains features similar to both. Now you might be wondering, what's a lexicon and how is it different from a dictionary? I've provided a link to a little intellectual tangent conversation at the bottom of this slide deck. So if you're following along in the slide deck, you can click on that link to go to that part of the slide deck. For now, we'll keep moving on. You will see, if you scroll down from that previous page in the lexicon tab, you'll see something that looks like this. You'll see a bunch of words, and you'll see the word worship highlighted in red in English with different words or synonyms related to it. You'll also see at the left-hand side this column of codes that are labeled Strong's numbers. And before we go any further, we need to understand what a Strong's number is. Strong's number actually comes from this dude, James Strong, who lived in the 19th century. He was many things, among them being a theologian, and when he was doing his Bible study work, he did something very helpful. He invented a cataloging system for Hebrew and Greek words so that non-specialists like myself, and maybe perhaps you, can refer to Greek and Hebrew words in an easy way without having to know how to read them or how to pronounce them or how to know what they mean. This is an example here as following. So for a Greek word, I don't actually know how to pronounce it correctly, but it might be eleuthero, something like that. He paired that with a code, G1659. In this case, the G stands for Greek, since this is a Greek word, and 1659 just means that this Greek word here was the 1659th word in an alphabetical list of the Greek words in the Greek New Testament. Great. So this G1659 then just becomes sort of an index or a stand-in code by which we can refer to this Greek word. He did this exact same thing for Hebrew words too. So there's this Hebrew word here, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, but the good news is that it has a code associated with it, H2670. So analogously, in this case, H stands for Hebrew, and 2670 just means that this Hebrew word is the 2670th word in an alphabetical list of the Hebrew words in the Hebrew Old Testament. Great. So what does this mean? Instead of reading the original language, we can just look for the word's index. So instead of having to read through, let's say, a Greek New Testament and spot all the places that eleuthero appear, we can just say, I want to look for G1659. And there are resources that can help us with this. But this numbering system of representing original language words with these codes came to be known as something called the Strong's numbering system, or just Strong's numbers for short. So if we click on a Strong's number in these list of Strong's number, you'll see each one of them, these numbers that we've highlighted in yellow, the codes are linked in blue if you actually go to the website, and we can click into them and view information, basically a dictionary entry for this Greek or Hebrew word. In your exercises, you can separately look at different words. So I would suggest looking at H5457, Segid, and H7812, Shakha. And also, since those are Hebrew words, we'll balance ourselves out with some Greek words as well. G1391, doxa, is a good one. And G4352, proskuneo, is another good one. That one is in the list on the website. You'll just have to scroll a little further down to get to that particular entry. Now, furthermore, in step 3 of dictionary, let's just summarize what we've looked at so far. So a Greek or a Hebrew dictionary entry is very similar to an English entry. However, we don't yet understand how a word is used in context. Just like the English dictionary, a Greek or Hebrew dictionary would list a range of the possible meanings. And we are left to understand from the context in which this word is used what the most appropriate meaning might be. So as we said just right now, understanding the word usage in context comes in a later step, but in this step we just look at the range of meaning. Now let's take a bit of a detour. It's actually a parallel road, but we're going to talk about something called a concordance. Now, what is a concordance? Is it a musical instrument? Is it a dance, an accordion dance? Well, no. Instead, a concordance, just using Merriam-Webster, which we've already used, it is an alphabetical index of the principal words in a book or in the works of an author, and this alphabetical index also includes those words' immediate contexts. Perhaps a physical example will help solidify what this looks like. So this is a physical book. This is actually by the same guy who invented the Strong's numbers, James Strong, you see down there, and the author. He invented this thing called the Strong's Concordance. And it is, if we take a peek inside, just a list of scripture references. So for instance, we see passages in Galatians and Ephesians, and there is a brief context for each verse, and then there is this little stand-in letter for here right now. This is the word F. You see it in one time in each line. And for example, in this highlighted line in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, we see the words, wherewith Christ hath made us, and then there's this little stand-in, F, with a little, I think it's an asterisk after the F. Now what this F is made to represent is where the English word would go, which corresponds to this code afterward. So 1659. This, in fact, is a representation of the Strong's number G1659, which we saw, I believe, maybe a little bit earlier. The word, I think, eleutherao, is the Greek word for our English word free. And that's actually why I think F is used here, because what we see here in this part of the concordance is the immediate context of the Greek words G1659 and its associated English translation of free. So, in the case of Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, wherewith Christ hath made us free. This is just an illustration, once again, of a particular word in this snippet that we're seeing inside with that word's immediate context. Now, about a concordance, what it does not provide. A concordance does not provide definitions or explanations. So a concordance is not the same as the dictionary. However, in some of our online resources, they will appear on the same page, so it's easy to get them confused. Let's do some work with a concordance in the Blue Letter Bible. So if we type a word into the search bar, just like we did earlier, for instance, the word worship, we can then search for that word and click on the Lexicon tab, and then click on the associated Strong's number you want to view. So for instance, if we type in the word worship and we look for the Strong's number G4352, that corresponds to the Greek word proskuneo, we can then scroll down to the concordance section for that specific translation that we want to use. In this particular case, we can select our translation by going to that drop-down menu that's highlighted in yellow and selecting ESV. And if we click search once more, the results will change to be shown for that particular translation. So we'll note here that the number of occurrences of the Greek word is the same regardless of English translation. Now, in one sense, that might seem like a common sense, right? The Greek text should have the same number of Greek words in it, regardless of what English translation we're using. This is often, but not always, the case. And it's hard to say why unless we dig a little bit deeper into how we get the original language summaries of what the Bible is. Now, for practice, let's just put some of this into work. So let's use these tools that we've covered here to make some observations about our word worship, specifically for G4352 proskuneo. What sort of observations? Let's make some observations about words that are present or absent around our study word. And let's look at whether the connotation of our word is strongly positive or negative. Another observation you could make are there kinds of actions or actions that are consistently associated with our word? Are there any characters associated or not associated with the study word consistently? And how do these observations compare across other occurrences of the word? Let's just jump to our examples here since we're in this video context. So we could make some observations about proskuneo in Matthew chapter 4, verse 9 and 10. This is where Jesus is being tempted by Satan. And Satan said to him, "All these things I will give you if you fall down and worship me," or proskuneo me. Then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall proskuneo the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." It's interesting because we see some verbs paralleled with proskuneo. So G4352 is paralleled with fall down. This is a Greek word, G4098, pipto. This is in verse 9 in the King James Version. We also see this proskuneo, G4352, paralleled with serve, which is G3000, latruo, in verse 10 of the KJV. Notice that these words describe physical actions, not emotions. This is actually a valuable observation for us because oftentimes we as modern Westerners may equate the idea of worship with a powerful feeling or emotion. But in context, these passages, or this passage here, parallels the word worship with physical actions. Another example for a way we could make observations in a passage context is in Matthew 15:25, which says, "But she came and knelt before him, saying, 'Lord, help me.'" A first observation is that the word worship doesn't actually occur in the English here. The word proskuneo is under the surface. The English translator saw that it was maybe a best choice to translate proskuneo as knelt before. That's actually how it is translated here, which is interesting. So this verse, furthermore, does not include G4098, pipto, like we saw in Matthew 4, 9, and 10, but it seems still to carry some of the same connotation because this is a physical action. And also, one more thing we could say is the object of G4352 is called Lord. We see that here in Matthew 15:25, right? She came and said, "Lord, help me." So the person who is being proskuneoed, if I can use that phraseology, is called Lord, right? Jesus here. The person who is doing the proskuneoing, if I can butcher the Greek word that way, is a Canaanite woman, or sometimes called a Syrophoenician woman. Basically, she is not a Jew. And it's interesting if we make this observation, right? The person being worshipped, a Gentile, is worshiping this Jew, or proskuneoing this Jew, and calling this person Lord, Son of David, and Master. This says something about the flavor or about the meaning or connotation of what proskuneo means. So the woman is also, we can say, seeking healing for a demonically oppressed daughter. This is something that we get from the broader context outside just verse 25 on its own. Basically, one thing that's interesting also is that the broader passage does not contain an obvious profession of faith in God by the woman, at least not the way we as modern thinkers think of a profession of faith in God. The closest thing that I think maybe we get is just the fact that the woman calls Jesus Lord, Son of David, and Master. But worship in this case is not necessarily to someone who is obviously called God, right? It's to, once again, a Canaanite woman who is kneeling down before a physical flesh and bones person, and that is the context in which this word proskuneo appears. So we talked about some of the things we can do in practice, and we looked at some examples. Some things to remember while you are using dictionaries and concordances. Even if a word doesn't appear in a given passage or book, the passage or book may still have related concepts or ideas. Therefore, you can look at the places with the most occurrences of the word of interest first. So if there's a particular book or a passage that has a lot of occurrences, you can look there. But you don't need to discount other books or passages in the Bible. They may still have themes or related words that are relevant and worth being studied. And also, when we're looking into the original languages, it's sometimes exciting to find something that we didn't know before. But that shouldn't be the sole reason that we look into the original languages. The point of a word study is not necessarily to discover something new, but something true. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you next time.